EdTalks are one of the elements that make the California Teacher Summit so unique. They are a great opportunity to hear directly from fellow teachers across Los Angeles County about what's working in their classroom, what challenges they're facing, and what innovative ways or techniques they use to help their students. These are real-world stories that offer insights for our own work and start a dialogue that will not only continue today, but continue throughout the school year. So today, I'm pleased and I'm honored to introduce Kimberly Dahm, a teacher on special assignment for high school ELA and ELD from the Azusa Unified School District. Kimberly will be talking with us today about why talk matters. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Miss Kimberly Dahm, one of our own.
Good morning, good morning. Thank you, David, and thank you all for this amazing opportunity to be here with you this morning. As a young teacher, I was often reminded, as Dr. Biden just reminded us once again, that the teacher is the single most significant factor in advancing student learning. And as a young teacher in the throes of the CST era, I somehow interpreted that to mean that my job was to cover more, better, and faster, right? Which in hindsight seems oxymoronic. Of course, we know the importance of timely feedback. So, in the naivete of my neophyte years, I thought that meant I needed to grade every paper every day so I could return it to students within a day or two. Needless to say, I didn't sleep very much during my first few years as a teacher. As an English teacher, of course, when I talk about grading papers, that also includes the essays, right? My English teachers in the audience, you know what I'm talking about? Always the essays. So, when we were working on developing writing, that meant I took all 170 essays home, and I needed to give detailed feedback on every single one of them so I could give them back to the students in time for tomorrow's class time to revise the essays, only to have beautifully formatted, typed, final drafts turned in that were eerily similar in content to the original draft that I had just read, right? So it still lacked clarity and depth of thought. Why? I provided specific timely feedback. I provided in-class time and instruction and exemplars, right? So I did the only logical thing. I assigned more writing, which of course meant more grading for me. And though I did see growth in student writing over the course of the year, it still was lacking that insight, that depth of thinking that I was really hoping to turn on in each and every one of my students. A few years ago, the esteemed Carol Jago shed some new light on this subject for me, on this struggle. It was one of those moments where the heavens open up and the angels sing, right? In her essay, Writing is Caught, Not Taught, Carol referenced the work of a guy named Hugh Blair, someone I had never heard of before. Hugh Blair was a preeminent 19th century rhetorician whose writing instruction largely influenced Abraham Lincoln. As Blair expressed it, we may rest assured that whenever we express ourselves ill, there is, besides the mismanagement of language, for the most part, some mistake in our manner of conceiving the subject. Embarrassed, obscure, and feeble sentences are generally, if not always, the result of embarrassed, obscure, and feeble thought. He that is learning to arrange his sentences with accuracy and order is learning at the same time to think with accuracy and order. There it was, clear as day. The reason my students' writing lacked depth and clarity was because their thinking lacked depth and clarity. Though on some level, I guess I knew it was true, I grasped it on a deeper level that day. And I could no longer, in my teaching, try to address the symptom while ignoring the cause. The reason their work lacked depth and clarity was because I didn't give them the time, the support, and the high expectations they needed to think about and understand the content on that deep level. In my current role as a teacher on special assignment, I have the privilege of working with colleagues in a wide variety of subject areas. As we work together across content areas to help students make the Common Core shift toward reading, writing, and speaking grounded in evidence, we are all faced with this reality, that in order to help students improve feeble sentences, we have to wean them from feeble thinking. But that's the challenge, isn't it? How do we teach students to think? And this is why, now, more than ever, talk matters. Because if we want students to not just read, but to think critically about what they're reading, talk matters. If we want students to not just write, but to communicate insightful ideas, talk matters. If we want students to not just communicate, but collaborate, talk matters. Whether you teach science, history, music, world language, physical education, or any other subject, if you teach young people, talk matters. In fact, based on my own observational data, and contrary to my feelings as a young educator, I would now argue that speaking and listening, more than any other standard strand in any content area, has the greatest potential to develop the 21st century skills of communication, collaboration, and critical thinking simultaneously. Like I said, talk matters. But in order for us to really understand this concept, we need to start with the why. Why does talk matter so much? Right? One purpose of talk, when we think about our own lives, is to help us clarify our own thinking. Right? I'm really good at excusing fuzzy logic in my own mind. Right? But once we put it out there, once we speak an idea aloud, it's a lot harder to let that idea be unrefined. If you've ever been in a relationship, you know what I'm talking about. Right? In my own head, I make tons of sense. And surprisingly, my husband doesn't always agree. But that's an entire talk in and of itself. Some of you have people in your life who act as sounding boards, right, for your ideas. Others of you, you prefer to talk to yourself or your pet or a plant, perhaps. Okay? We do this because speaking things out loud and talking through our ideas helps us to bring clarity and insight to our own thinking. Another important benefit of talk is that it helps provoke our thinking through the exchange of ideas. In our everyday lives, we experience this benefit when we seek advice for solving a problem, when we discuss politics, current events, or perhaps, most notably today, when we take a day on our summer vacation to engage in focused, collaborative discourse with other educators because we believe that we are truly better together. That through collaboration, through true co-laboring in this profession of educating young minds, that we will continually increase our efficacy in the classroom. If you are listening to my voice right now, I would argue that you believe talk matters. When it came to my students, however, I realized that I would often allow or excuse fuzzy logic for the sake of time, for the sake of not wanting to question a student, for fear of putting them on the spot. Right? And I would still be frustrated by their shallow understanding of the topic when we got to the end of a unit. And I realized that if we really want students to be open-minded, collaborative, critical thinkers, we have to be willing to give them the time, the space, and the support to genuinely engage in the vigorous exchange of ideas, just like we value. So, if talk is so significant to the development of thought, then it stands to reason that how we talk matters as well. Think for a moment about when you enjoy most talking to others. Think about what it is about that conversation that makes it enjoyable. As I talk to people, they cite things like they enjoy talking to people who are knowledgeable or when people are really thoughtful about a topic. They enjoy when people listen attentively and respectfully and exchange ideas. They enjoy when people ask poignant questions that make them think. Right? And in spite of the fact that we value rigorous, meaningful discourse in our own learning process, Stanford senior researcher Jeff Zweers, an expert on academic conversations in education, has found that this value is not reflected in our classrooms. Among his findings, Zweers notes that students have few opportunities to put their ideas into multi-sentence responses during school lessons. There are very few productive back and forth conversations between students, and students tend to lack the conversation skills to even hold those conversations. So, if we want to develop citizens who think and listen attentively and respectfully to ideas and ask poignant questions, we cannot leave this learning to chance. These skills don't just exist. They are developed. Now, more than ever, for all students, but especially for our most vulnerable learners, for our English learners, for our students with special needs, for our students who are coming to us from low socioeconomic backgrounds, providing explicit instruction and regular practice with academic conversation is essential. It's essential not only to develop their speaking and listening skills, though those are certainly important, but it is essential if we want to develop 21st century learners who possess the skills of collaboration, communication, and critical thinking. Jeff Zweers and his team have done some amazing work in this area and have distilled conversations down to 2 basic dimensions. Seems simple, but they're pretty profound. Dimension 1 is that turns build upon previous turns in the conversation, right? Basically, first, each participant's contribution should somehow connect to what has previously been said. Essentially, contributions to a conversation should show the person is actually listening. Okay, the other aspect of Dimension 1 is that at the end of the conversation, students should have a clearer understanding of what they think, why they think it, and how to express it than they did prior to having that conversation. This goes back to the whole concept of clarifying our thinking and provoking our thinking that I talked about just previously. Dimension 2 states that turns focus on the knowledge and skills of the lesson's objectives. Essentially, Dimension 2 measures whether the conversation stays on topic and to what extent it advances student learning. So the big question, how do we do this? First, one way we can do this is to begin to develop this culture of conversation by modeling this kind of exchange in our own class discussions. Expect students to present clear, well-developed ideas and not just short one-word responses. Like I said, I would often let them off the hook because we had to keep going. Teach them how to ask one another for clarifications or examples. Second, provide explicit instruction in and practice with the skills of academic conversation. Those skills that focus on building on one another's ideas and deepening thought. Third, provide engaging, rigorous topics for student discussion. Right? One way we do this is by planning questions that allow for more than one perspective or more than one right answer, rather than a mere recitation of facts. And 4, pay attention to language. Effective conversation, when you really look at it, has tremendous both input and output of language. Don't get me wrong, I love cooperative learning strategies and protocols to ensure active participation. But I couldn't be up here today without making sure that as you leave here, we're careful in thinking about it, not to assume that assigning group work or cooperative learning is the same thing as collaboration, right? That assigning group work will automatically develop all students' ability to think, collaborate, and communicate effectively. Developing academic conversation in the classroom takes time, it takes planning, and it takes intentionality. In closing, my hope here today is that by taking the time to think about why talk matters in our own lives, and that how we talk matters, that you will begin to view student talk through a slightly different lens, a lens framed by the demands of 21st century learning. And one final thought, if I may. If talk matters for learning, talk matters for us. As we model lifelong learning for our students, remember that our talk matters. In our professional spheres, we can lead this kind of conversation not only within our classrooms, but also beyond our classrooms. I encourage you today, don't let the ideas and experiences and the spirit of Better Together be confined to today. Consider, how might you contribute to this culture of collaboration, not only within your classroom, but at your site, within your district, maybe across the state? Because talk really does matter. Thank you.